Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're so excited to be here and part of this Out of the Box conference. My name's Sarah Akhtar. I am a partner at Transcend focused on community engagement, and I'm very excited to have our speaker panel with us today to talk about innovative models in education. I'm going to introduce our speakers and then we'll jump into some conversation in just a minute. First, today we have Ron Berger on the call. Ron Berger is the Senior Advisor for Teaching and Learning at EL Education, which is a national nonprofit. He has written some books, which some of you may have read, An Ethic of Excellence and a Culture of Quality, and co-authored many, many more. And he also was a public school teacher and master carpenter in rural Massachusetts for over 25 years. I also had the pleasure of working closely with Ron when I worked at an EL school, and he has been a role model in my life, and I'm really excited to get to spend this time with him today. Next, we also have on the call Cynthia Robinson Rivers, who I get to call a colleague now at Transcend. She's also a partner, and she supports schools in adopting the whole child model, which she helped to develop while she was serving as the head of school at Van Ness Elementary in Washington, D.C. She has worked at the central office on several human capital initiatives, really cool programming. She also has a background as a teacher in early childhood and elementary students in both public and charter schools in DC and California. Before we jump fully into the conversation with our speakers today and the models that they are coming to represent, I just wanted to take a moment to define what Transcend means when we talk about a model, and also mention this models exchange that we have recently launched. So when we talk about a model, we're really talking about a program that could be replicated or adapted, adopted, used by multiple schools that addresses different structures, routines, procedures, and just ways of doing school. So it's a little bit more than, say, a curriculum or an approach to just one piece of the school day. Oftentimes a model impacts, the structure of the day, the student's experience, the adult's experience of being in the building. The two models that we've chosen today are exceptional ones. They have a track record of both having a strong academic focus and a strong focus on the whole child, students' well-being, and students' sense of belonging. So that's why we brought them both together to chat today. And at the end of the call, we'll dive more into this exchange that we've created at Transcend, which is really a repository of all different innovative models. You'll get a sneak peek at it with one of my colleagues who's also on the call today. And you'll get to find out more about both EL and the whole child model and many, many more. So super exciting stuff. And we're going to jump right into the conversation now. So I'll invite my colleagues to come into the spotlight. And we'll start with asking some questions. I'm going to start with you, Ron. How would you sum up the key aspects of what the EL education model is?
Well, first, Sarah, I just want to say what a delight it is to see you again. And let me just brag about you for a moment here to say, when I first met you, you were a founding member of a new public district secondary school in Springfield, Massachusetts. And since you left that school, they've had more than 15 graduating classes, and they've never had a graduate who was not accepted into college. And it is not a tiny school. It's 700 students, most of them Black and brown students, most of them first generation, and every single student for 15 consecutive years has gotten into college, and you started that with that founding team. So it was a pleasure to work with you, and you look exactly the same to me now. EL Education, we're a nonprofit, national nonprofit. We've been around for 30 years. I've been around actually in EL since we started. And our model has lots in common with the whole child model, Cynthia, that you will talk about. But it is a whole child model as well. We do not separate character from academics, character from scholarship. We believe that character and scholarship can't be separated, because what makes you a great student, a lot of that is character. Your performance character, your moral and ethical character, and your civic character. Like those play into how well you'll do in school. And the purpose of school is not just to get good grades and good test scores. The purpose of school is to create the kind of citizens and human beings that we want to live with, that will help shape our country, run our country, that we depend on. And so we fuse all day long, which means that social emotional learning and character development don't happen on Tuesday afternoons after academics are done. They happen from the moment you arrive at school, and they happen all day long. And the kind of person you are is as important as what you're learning. Another thing I would say that characterizes EL is we see school as putting kids on a mission to get smart, to do good. So it is a mission-driven program, mission-driven model, where students are trying to contribute to make their communities better places. So the academic learning they're doing is directly tied to local connections. So for example, students at the school that you helped to found, Sarah, have reopened an urban pond that had been closed due to pollution, due to their testing and cleanup and work. They have done energy audits of the city buildings and help the city to retrofit those buildings to make them more energy efficient, which is saving hundreds of thousands of dollars of taxpayer money, but it's also helping save the environment. And so when kids see that the work they're doing is actually making their families and their communities and the world a better place, they have a whole different motivation for working hard. So that's another aspect of our model. And the name EL Education came from our original name, which was Expeditionary Learning. And that idea is a project-based model in which kids do a metaphoric expedition into a topic. And they study it deeply, both from a disciplinary point of view, but also the local connection point of view, where we bring in experts from the community and experts from the world. And students are involved in real-world projects where they can contribute in some way to making the world better.
Fantastic overview, Ron. Let's stick with EL education a little bit more, and then we'll switch over to hear more about the whole child model. What would you say is like a target user or type of school that might adopt the EL model?
I'd say it has to be a school that is open to the idea of doing school differently. Most of the schools that we work with, and we work with as a whole model, we work with about 150 schools all across the country. Most of them are urban or rural schools that serve low-income communities. But we also have suburban schools that serve middle-class communities. I don't actually think there's a demographic that would use this better or worse, or that it's not important for. We just happen to have a mission to serve underserved communities. So that's where most of our work has been. But, and I also think it often is easier in a smaller school. But I mean, we have a high school in Lexington, South Carolina that has 2,200 students that's doing a beautiful job with it. And the middle school next door that has 1,200 students that's doing a beautiful job with it. And so I think anyone could adopt this model if they feel like we're willing to do school differently. We're willing to be open to making character and social emotional health a part of all day long. And we're willing to push kids beyond what they thought they could do academically. Like there's no tracking, there's no leveling. There's like every kid gets the option of being college bound. Every kid gets the option of the highest level work. A school has to believe in students, that every student is capable of high level work, to use the model.
Certainly seen that in my time in Springfield. Can you explain for everyone today, Ron, how exactly does EL partner with schools to help share and spread the model, and what do the services look like?
Sure. Well, for about 20 years, Sarah, the only way we partnered was with our full model. And our full model is like the Van Ness model that Cynthia will talk about. The full model is a whole different way of doing school all day long, as you described. Right now, there's about 150 schools doing that nationally. And we don't really advertise. Schools usually come to us. They say, well, the highest performing school in our city is using your model. We're interested as well. And then we meet with them and we have a conversation over the course of months. They visit schools that are using our model. We visit them. And if they really believe that this model would work in their community, and we really believe that they're serious about this work, we then forge a multi-year relationship to make the transformation. And so the transformation could take 3 years or 5 years to really transform from a regular traditional setting to a school to using this model fully. We also work with local school districts and charter boards to open new schools. Like the school that you were a founding member of, Sarah, was a collaboration with a local school district who said, we want to open a new high school where every kid will get into college. And so we planned that school with the district from scratch. But we're not a charter management organization, so we don't own any schools. We partner with schools to bring the model in. And then we put a coach, and I was your coach, actually, back when. We bring in a coach who's on site at the school for about 40 days a year, working, leading professional learning, going into classrooms, leading demonstration lessons, meeting with people, troubleshooting, sort of being a guide to the implementation of the model. And then 10 years ago, we realized we can't reach enough schools quickly enough with that model. And so we produced a free online curriculum, a literacy curriculum that bakes in social emotional health and learning and character, and is founded around social justice themes. And that literacy curriculum has now been adopted district-wide in many places in the country. So a lot of cities like Detroit and Oakland and Denver and Boston and Memphis and Charlotte and Raleigh and Richmond, Des Moines have adopted that literacy curriculum, which bakes in social justice work and also social emotional learning and character work. And so through that, we're working with almost 500,000 students through those partnerships, those district partnerships. So there's really two versions of our model out there right now, the full model and schools that are deeply moving into a fused literacy character version of the model.
It's great to see that there are multiple entry points in, and that schools can kind of explore to the amount that they have the capacity to take on at a time. Great. Thank you, Ron. We will definitely come back to more questions for you. But for now, I want to switch over to Cynthia and ask you to kind of do the same thing. Can you give us an overview of the whole child model and explain maybe who it's for and where it's operating?
Yeah, thank you so much. And Ron is right. The similarities abound between the two models. So you'll hear a lot of that when I explain the whole child model. So the whole child model is unique in that it assumes the well-being of both the adults and the students in school buildings has to live throughout every interaction, routine, and academic lesson that is facilitated. So while some approaches coined as socio-emotional learning are curricula that are taught at a specific time of the day or week, the whole child model aims to help teachers and staff integrate their understanding of the brain, of the science of learning and development, into all of the experiences a child might have. And that's from the type of language and tone of voice that a teacher may use, to the setup of the physical room environment, to the type of projects that encourage students to engage in. So our approach is distinct in its comprehensiveness. The well-being aspect of the model includes a universal set of tier 1 supports every child who enters the building receives. We call that CARE, which is for compassion, assertiveness, routines, and environment. But also guidance for teachers on how to implement interventions and scaffolds for students who just need more support to be successful in school. And then the maker-centered learning focus of the model and the opportunity for students to engage in projects and classroom makerspaces takes the concept of well-being and extends it into and throughout academics. In those makerspaces, students have opportunities to go beyond self-regulation, self-management, which is often the focus of socio-emotional learning curricula, to other components of their well-being, such as their positive self-identity, agency, and confidence to change and improve their community and world. And so at this point, we are in 15 schools in DC, 5 schools and counting in Texas, and a school in Memphis, Tennessee, partnered with each of them to share this whole child model.
Great, thank you. That's a great overview. And would you say there is a target type of school that is ready to adopt your model, or can you speak to like the types of school who have adopted your model?
Yeah. Schools adopt our model when they recognize that teachers lack the knowledge and skills, both to mitigate it against their own triggers, to understand the why behind challenging student behavior, or simply because they want to improve the sense of connection and belonging in the school community. Some school leaders seek out our model because they know they want to move away from harsher, punitive approaches to discipline, but they don't yet know what to replace those practices with. And then other schools recognize this is an approach that values and respects traditionally marginalized students, rather than aiming to force them to comply with rigid rules. And a lot of schools got to that inflection point in the past couple of years of racial unrest in our country. And I wouldn't say there's a type of school for which this is best. I think it's an approach that benefits all children and educators. We do, though, have a process where we help schools assess the conditions, so that they are both working with their community and working with teachers who are at the point where they're interested in having a different approach than a more traditional approach in other public schools.
Fantastic. And Cynthia, can you detail a little bit more what supports and resources you're offering for these schools who are trying to adopt this model?
Yep, we have a few ways that we partner with schools. So schools that are interested in adopting the model first engage in a year-long process we call Ignite at Transcend, where they examine the conditions at their school, they identify the status of teacher mindsets, they interview students, interview families to get their perspectives, and then they consider what their community needs in a school model. And during this time, several practices are piloted by teachers who are members of a design team that's learning about the model from us during that year. At the end of that year, if the school is interested and if Transcend feels like the conditions are right, we partner up and they become a part of the Whole Child Collaborative. And that's a cohort of schools that engages in learning with coaching support from Transcend. And we work with the schools over the course of several years, slowly phasing in practices school-wide. There's some schools that work with us without being part of this more intensive partnership and collaborative cohort. For example, there's a charter school in DC that has requested sort of a lighter touch support from us, which we've been willing to do. And then many, many other schools who utilize open source materials that are available on our website. And that usually happens when they face a challenge or a need that one of those implementation guides will help them to resolve. The most common of them, structured recess, which is an approach that is an alternative to taking away recess that allows kids who need to learn how to play safely to do so within a structure that we share with schools that ask for it.
So important. And the debate about recess has been around for a long time. So that sounds like a great solution to that. For both of you, I'm curious, and maybe Cynthia, you can start. What are the big outcomes you've seen? Ron spoke about a couple of them from the EL model, but I'm curious, Cynthia, what have you seen as a result? You've mentioned a bunch of targets and goals. Can you ground us in some actual results?
Yeah, we've seen some strong results at Van Ness, which was the original school where the model was developed. We look a lot at the Panorama survey, which just gauges students' feeling of being loved, challenged, and prepared. The last time Van Ness took it, there was a 98% satisfaction rate with students, 95% for parents. Teachers said they felt like they were prepared to lead with well-being in mind, with a 90% rate of them saying we're prepared with valuable and effective professional learning on that topic. Importantly, at our partner schools that are adopting the model in DC, they're seeing rates on that same survey that are 15 to 20% higher than the district average on the measures included in it. We look at the class survey, which is an early childhood measure, and Van Ness has typically scored in the top 5 out of the 70 or so elementary schools on each of the domains of the class. And that's encouraging because while it has a comprehensive assessment of kids' emotional and physical development, it also includes academics. And we saw the last time years ago that we took part some strong scores on the ELA side, but we know that sometimes there is a delay while well-being and an emphasis on it definitively is interwoven with and positively impacts academic achievement. That can sometimes be delayed. And so our school is definitely continuing to work on academic measures and putting things in place in addition to a focus on well-being to improve in that way as well.
Incredible. Thank you, Cynthia. Ron, how about you? What outcomes, results have you all been seeing in the EL world?
Well, first, just such great respect, Cynthia, to what you're sharing. I love the model that you're sharing, and it is so overlapping with the same vision as we have. Sarah, we at EL have a different definition of student achievement than the typical one. So we talk about typically student achievement is looked at one-dimensionally. How do kids do on math and language arts tests? Like that's the way all schools are judged. So we use what we call a three-dimensional view of student achievement, that there's mastery of knowledge and skills in academics, and there's student character. And then there's high quality work, craftsmanship, doing beautiful work. And so if you say what are the outcomes? I would say they're in all of those areas. So in mastery of knowledge and skills in academics and in those ways, 95% of the high schools we work with are graduating their kids on time and getting them all into college. All of the schools that are credentialed in our network outperform their districts or comparable schools in terms of their test scores. But that's just one area. I mean, to me, just as important is when you go to those schools, you'll meet students, and I'm sure Ness and all of the schools you work with, Cynthia, be the same way, who you think, oh my goodness, I didn't realize kids could be so kind, so thoughtful, so looking out for each other, caring for the world. Like they are good human beings. When people go to our schools, I think the first thing that strikes them is the maturity and kindness and vision of the students beyond their academic results. And then I have this particular passion for craftsmanship, that there's beautiful student work on the walls of the school, all kinds of work in all different disciplines and interdisciplinary work because in life, we're not measured by test scores, right? Once you're done with school, test scores are done. You're measured by the kind of human being you are and the kind of work that you do. And so we want kids who feel like the work I do is going to be incredible work, beautiful work, because whether you're an architect or a city planner or a teacher or you work as a plumber, the quality of your work is what matters. And we need to build into school a vision that if I'm going to do it, I'm going to have high standards for what I do, and having kids with that work ethic. And so we have the world's largest collection of beautiful student work, a Models of Excellence open website. That's student work, not just from our schools, but from schools all over the world, where students submit work they've done that's beautifully done. So I would say outcomes, our test scores look good. And even like when every student K-8 in the city of Detroit started using our curriculum, they had the highest test scores that they had had ever in the history of Detroit. So their test scores bumped up in a way that they hadn't at every grade level. So there's those kinds of data, but those aren't the only kinds of data that matter to us, because just as important is the social justice and civil rights and sense of agency kids have, as you said, Cynthia, to make a difference in the world, and that they also do beautiful work. So, outcomes for me are good citizens, good human beings who do beautiful work, even more importantly than that they get good test scores.
Well said. And Ron, your inspiration around craftsmanship has always been in my brain. I remember when I was a school designer as well as a teacher, anytime I created an anchor chart with chart paper, you were there watching me. Like, is it beautiful enough? And not in a bad way, like in a really beautiful, supportive, like striving for excellence way. And now in my work at Transcend, I work with a lot of school leaders in all different stages of their journey in adopting a model like this, or even considering to adopt a model like this. And a question I often hear is, it's great to see these visions and these outcomes and these descriptors of amazing quality and engaged students and active citizens, but what does year one look like? How do we get there from maybe where we're starting from? So I'm curious, maybe Ron, you could start and then we'll pass over to Cynthia. What advice would you have to a school design team who's just embarking on adopting a model like this or doing work like this in their schools?
Well, I will build on what Cynthia, you shared, that the student culture in a school is never going to be ahead of the adult culture, right? The teachers and the leaders and the whole school staff have to feel that they're a team, that they're in this together, At EL, we use the word crew for that they have this sense of crew. We are all in a crew together. And you know, Sarah, that when we started working together, when you were a teacher, we met in crew meetings as a staff. We circled up and we talked about our lives and our identities and our visions and why we were in education in the first place and our frustrations. Because if the staff doesn't have their full heart in this and doesn't believe in the model and doesn't believe in the potential of each other, how are they going to model that for students? And so I think the first year is a lot of building the understanding and trust, the relational trust among the team, the full staff, so that people feel like we are not siloed like in a typical school where we're all hiding in our classrooms or our offices or our places. We're actually meeting together regularly and talking honestly about what's going well and what's not. So it's inevitable that when you try a new model, a great model like Cynthia's or like ours, or many of the models that you feature in the new models exchange, it's going to be hard at first. It's not going to go easily and things will go wrong. And it's key to have a staff culture where people can be honest. I tried that and it's not working for me, and have other people be able to talk about it with them so that it's not like just implement it and it will work. It just doesn't work that way. As you pointed out, Cynthia, this is about relationships. It's about staff relationships and relationships with students, and relationships are never easy. And so having a culture where honesty in your process of change is the norm allows you to support each other as you're trying things out and they fail, and then you try them slightly differently and you make them your own. So I think the first year is a lot about building that sense of cohesion among the staff of the school. And by staff, I don't just mean teachers. I mean the custodians and the school nurses and the cafeteria folks, that we're in this together because they all affect the lives of children so deeply. But we're all in this together and we respect each other. And then the students feel like this school's a different place. I mean, the people are on a team that we work with here. So that's my hope for our first year.
Thanks, Ron. Cynthia, what would you add?
Yeah, I would agree that starting with the teachers or the adults in the building is really where you have to begin. And we certainly did that at the beginning stages of the whole child model. We spent a full year not even attempting to implement any practices with students, but rather doing them all in an adult-facing way, having the teachers feel what that feels like before being asked to do those structures and routines with their students. Also importantly, we take things very slowly. And with our school partners who have access to and see all the components of the model, they often want to try to roll out like 5 to 7 practices in their first year. And I will share with them a document from our school that just shows how narrow of a thing each year we implemented and then layered on and layered on. And it was really critical to the success of each of those things because the teachers and the staff actually had time to internalize the why, get good at the practice before trying to do more. And that is so hard. The sense of urgency in public education often makes us try to do things too fast, faster than the speed of conditions, as we say at Transcend often. And then lastly, and it's interesting, we looked to another school in DC that was an EL education school back when we were founding Van Ness, and had like 8 or 10 books we wanted to read with the staff. I had just been at Harvard's Project Zero and like a bunch of different texts from people there that was so inspiring to me. And the school leader from this charter school in DC told me I was crazy and said to choose one book and read that with the staff. What we did with that, though, was every year we did that. So a year-long book study and a summer book study, such that people who have been at the school for 6 or 7 years have now read over a dozen books together. And that purposeful, intentional, slow knowledge building of the staff, I think, is also so helpful to where you're not implementing something because you've been told to do it and because you're having fidelity to it, but because you truly deeply understand the why behind it.
Love that emphasis on less is more. And if you want to go fast, you go alone. But if you want to go far, let's go together, right? At the pace that everyone can manage. Fantastic. I'd love to wrap up our conversation time today with you engaging with each other and asking any questions that you might have for each other. So I'll kind of open up the space for some open conversation.
I would love to dive in because Cynthia, I am such a fan of the model and I've watched videos of Van Ness work. Edutopia did some beautiful videos of you guys in your work, and I love the model. So my question for you, which is very much comes from our struggles, is when it's not working, what's going wrong? Like when you're working with a school and things are not catching well, or the culture is not doing well, what usually happens? Like, where are the kinds of situations where things struggle, and how do you address them?
It's something we've been thinking about so much recently in trying to determine the type and intensity of support a school needs. What we recently realized is the kind of work we do is deeply adaptive, personal, mindset changing work with teaching and learning. It is not like a straightforward, like technical sort of curriculum that you can go to a training and then just do in your classroom. Because of that, it takes a lot of support. And so we found that schools that were attempting to adopt this model that didn't have as much coaching support as we needed to provide them didn't do as well. You know, when we think about the language and tone that we use, or like the extent to which we can empathize with a child before we address them, like we're talking about actually changing who you are, how you grew up, everything you've known about how you relate to other people and to children. And that takes so much work, more than, you know, a quick session and then go back to your school could achieve. And then my last point about the why, right? Many of our practices you could just do, right? Greetings is a great example. You read about greetings, you review the greetings implementation guide, and you try to do it. And so you say, good morning, Ron, come on in, and miss out all of the things that should be part of greetings if you knew the reason behind them: the serve and return, the encouraging healthy attachment, the boost of oxytocin that comes from that warm, eye-level, playful interaction. And when you understand all that brain science stuff, then you greet the child in the way greetings is meant to happen and in the spirit with the goals in mind. So when we haven't done a good job of sharing the why with school teams, then we see things happen in a perfunctory way rather than in a meaningful and authentic way. All right, I have one for you too, because I've been watching your videos. So I think since 2013-14, every year at each school I've worked at, in the beginning of the year, our teachers watch the butterfly video, and then they engage with their kids in this process of like creating something, getting feedback from peers, and improving it with the goal that you shared earlier, that it's important to make your work beautiful and have it be your best. I'm just curious if at my schools that has now influenced hundreds, thousands of kids. Where are the other places you've been able to see some small thing like that 5-minute video that you've completed, like deeply changing practices of schools? And how does that feel when you reflect on that, when you visit schools?
It's a great question. That Austin's butterfly video is definitely the way I'm known in the world, mostly. I mean, when I travel around the world, people say, do I know you? And then, you know, they'll say, oh, are you the butterfly guy? And I'll think, yeah, that's exactly right. That video really has been unique in terms of being watched a lot. And I love it just because it inspires people to want to have their kids do beautiful work, which I truly love. I would actually build on something that you shared about. Your model, Cynthia, has a lot of protocols that are built in. And I think those protocols have a deceptive power because when teachers start using them, things start changing a bit. So, you know, as I said to you, Sarah, we had this experiment at scale. We created a free and open ELA curriculum that's now spread to, you know, 450,000 students. And many of these teachers were, as you would have described, Cynthia, sort of obedience-based teachers where kids just had to sit up straight and not move all day, even when they were little ones. And the protocols required them to have kids turning and talking and sharing things and sharing their learning and doing other things. And they really thought our kids can't do that. But when they tried the protocols, they were like, oh, maybe they can do that. And so for me to walk into schools in Charlotte or in Raleigh or in Des Moines or Detroit or Oakland, where they're using this curriculum, they think, my kids have a lot more in them than I realized they have, because the protocols themselves, which I think your model, Cynthia, does a beautiful job of as well, giving teachers new ways for kids to interact where they can be focused but don't have to be passive and just listeners, opens teachers' minds to a different way of, well, I guess I've been underestimating how much my kids can be self-managing and can be appropriate and focused. And so I mean, our curriculum is only for ELA, but when I go into these classrooms, third grade classrooms, they say, I use those protocols in my math lessons, in my social studies lessons, in my art lessons. Like, I don't know why I didn't use those things before. And so I think that's been something that I've seen catch for people, is structures that allow kids to collaborate effectively changes a teacher's vision about how collaboration is possible.
I love it. That's a beautiful note to kind of wrap up our conversation component of this call. Thank you so much, Cynthia and Ron. 40 minutes is not enough. I would love 4 hours with you in real life. So maybe we can arrange that down the road. This has been an enlightening conversation and inspiring for me to just remember how much I've loved being a part of the growth of a model and value the being a teacher when a model was kind of presented and having all of that support and growing professionally with support you just wouldn't get normally if you're doing it by yourself, even if you're doing it for a 30-year career. So thank you to both of you. I want to segue now and invite my colleague Saya to do a little quick tour of the Models Exchange. And we'll be sharing links with everyone in the audience for you to access what Saya is going to show you. You can read more about the EL education model, the whole child model, and as you'll see, many, many more. So Saya, I'll pass it to you to do a brief intro and a short walkthrough. Thanks, Saya.
Thanks, Sarah. So I am going to quickly walk us through the exchange. So this is the exchange where you can find inspiring, innovative learning models like EL and the whole child model. And in addition to learning about those models, you actually get the resources and supports to implement them as well. So on the exchange, you can browse our many models by searching for a keyword or using one of our many filters on the left-hand side. You can filter by the design of the model, like the grade it was designed for, or the outcomes they drive towards, or the types of implementation supports that are offered, or the contexts and communities that the model reaches. And if you're ever unsure about what the words might mean, you can just hover over to get a definition of each of these terms. Another great feature is that you can actually save and share models. So I was on this webinar, I learned about EL education and the whole child model. So I'm going to save those because I might want to share these. I then go here to my saved models and I see I've saved these models and I can share this list. And when I share that URL, whoever I share it with would receive these models where they can go deeper into the models. And to show you an example of what each exchange entry looks like, every model is laid out into these 4 sections. It begins with an overview of the model, and then you can click deeper to get into the details of the design. What are the goals they drive towards? What is the student experience? And what are the supporting structures that enable the model to really happen? And in each of these, we try and link videos and artifacts as much as possible to really bring the model to life. The next tab goes deeper into what you need to know to actually implement the model, what supports the model offers, as well as the reach and impact of the model, and a point of contact that you can actually reach out to. Lastly, the resources aggregates any video or artifact linked all in one place. In addition to models, the exchange also has collections. And collections are focused on a particular topic area. They include an overview of the topic, as well as related models, curated resources, and events. So here's an example of advisory. We have an overview of what advisory is, different opportunities related to advisory, models on the exchange that include an advisory-like approach, and resources to really learn more about this topic. And if you are not sure where to begin exploring on the exchange, we have a quick quiz that you can take that will actually recommend models for you. So for example, I can click the grades that I'm interested in, the outcomes I'm driving towards, a key practice I might want to use, and the type of support I'm looking for. And then it'll recommend to me several models on the exchange that I can look into. And I hope this is helpful in helping you explore the exchange on your own.
Super cool. Saya, thank you for walking us through that. As I mentioned, everyone will get a link to the exchange and those saved models that we talked about today. So you can play, explore, discover, and hopefully help your schools that you work with innovate and adopt these models if they're a good fit. Thanks again to Ron, Cynthia, the whole team at Transcend. Thank you everyone who came in attendance today. This was such a wonderful way to reconnect and spend time. And really, I can't say enough for the amazing work Cynthia and Ron, you both are doing in spreading these models. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And everybody have a great rest of your day and enjoy the rest of the conference. Bye-bye.